Hey everyone, this is Jackson Martin in the Department of Art and Art History at UNC Asheville with a how-to video for Sculpture 1. So today I'm going to show you how to use the black annealed wire and a torch with map gas, and we're going to braze things together. Now the first thing really to talk about is the equipment. There's lots of different tools and supplies you're going to need for this process. A lot of this is provided for you, but you're going to need some black annealed wire, a roll of it, or a spool. You can get that at any hardware store. 16 gauge is preferable. And you'll need a can of map gas. Now don't get propane, get map gas. It's in a yellow canister, not a blue or a green canister. It burns hotter than propane. You definitely need map gas. You need a torch as well. A self-lighting torch is better than one that you have to spark light because it puts out more flame and therefore more heat. We provide the flux. It's a powdered flux, unlike soldering, which is a paste flux. But we provide this for you guys, and we keep it in this can. So make sure you seal the lid when you're done, and we can have some extra in this can and a little Dixie cup. You can put your own in there and use it while you're brazing. We also provide the filler rod, which is a brass rod. It comes in a 3-foot length right out of the tube, which is kind of hard to deal with. So one of the first things you'll want to do if you're pulling out a new piece is to clip it in half just so it's easier to use while you braze. Now some of the hand tools that you're going to need, wire cutters to be able to snip things, as well as pliers, needle nose pliers, blunt nose, things like that. My favorite are the needle nose pliers. Locking pliers or vice grips are coming in handy. And my favorite, again, are the needle nose locking pliers. Tape measure, regular tape measure, flexible tape measure, so you can measure curves and different things for your maquettes. Safety glasses, obviously, and gloves come in handy with the hot metal to be able to handle it before it cools down. You may want some leather gloves. All right, so now we'll get started on the actual process. You get your map gas canister. Yeah, definitely safety glasses as always. Get your map gas canister, take the top off, and then grab your torch and thread the torch onto the canister, being sure that you don't misthread it. If it's not twisting on easily, you're doing something wrong. Snug it up. It doesn't have to be on really tight, but definitely snug. And then the trigger is this little red button here, and when you click it, it lights up. Be sure that you point the flame away from yourself. It doesn't matter kind of which direction, just as long as it's away from you. So when you click that red button, it turns on and off. Now to get the flame on while you use your hands, you use the top button to secure the flames being on. Oh yeah, and then the flux, you put it into a little Dixie cup so that you're not using it right out of the big can. And you clip off some black annealed wire. I'm just going to do a quick kind of crossover connection here to show you the process. A lot of the setup is takes some time to get things exactly the way you want it, but the actual brazing process is quick. So take your time setting things up. You can hold it with pliers. As the heat kind of transfers through the metal, it will start to warm up pretty quickly. Depending on how long it's in the flame, you may want to use pliers. Locking pliers are nice because then you don't have to hold the pliers together for that process. All right, so I'm going to grab my brazing rod, my brass rod, and what I'm going to braze together. I'm going to turn on the flame, and I'm going to preheat the metal right at the connection until it's kind of glowing orange or even just a dull orange. I'm going to sprinkle on a little flux over the Dixie cup so all the extra drops back into the cup. You don't need a whole lot, but you definitely want it right where you're going to be doing the connection. Put it back in the flame, also putting my brass rod into the flame, kind of heating both at the same time, but the annealed wire heats up so much faster, so I kind of pull it away from the flame to make sure that the brass melts at the same time as the steel is glowing orange. Then it'll flow into that joint by capillary action. and you're ready to go. Now that's one way of doing it. Another way that you can actually braze, very similar, same crossover connection. I'm going to preheat the metal. Then I'm going to heat the end of the tip of the brass rod just a little bit, and then dip the brass rod into the flux to get a little bit of flux on the end of the brass rod, and then bring it back in for the brazing process. This way you don't have to sprinkle on the flux onto the joint. It's already connected to the end of the brass rod. So you're kind of dabbing it into the joint, both the flux and the brass, as it starts to melt. And like I said, when the brass starts to melt, it's going to be almost like water. That's when you know you've done it correctly. It starts to flow like water. So here's a close-up of the process for you guys to see. You can kind of see the details and the intricacies a little bit better in this video. But I preheated the brass, I dipped it in the flux, and I've got my annealed wire here. I'm going to do a little preheating of it, and you can start to see it turning orange right there where I want it to connect. And then I'm going to start to kind of dab the end of the brass rod there, and the flux gets into the connection. And then heating the brass rod so it starts to melt. If your steel is too warm, you can pull it away from the flame, but like I said, you'll know you'll have it when the brass flows like water in the connection. When that happens, you pull it away from the flame, you let it cool, you turn your flame off, and that's it. A really good connection is both sides of the joint. Okay, so the setup is also extremely important. Using locking pliers to hold your wire together while you do the brazing process comes in handy. So we have lots of locking pliers available for you guys. It's better if you have your own. Magnets actually work really well. The annealed wire is a ferrous metal, so it sticks to magnets. So you can set up your joint using magnets. These things at Harbor Freight called Helping Hands have two little clips on them, and they work out really well. It's only $4 or $5 at Harbor Freight, and it's an invaluable tool to have if you can travel out there and buy one. But it also holds things together while you do the brazing joint. You can also use something heavy. We have steel weights and bricks in the studio. Really anything that is heavy and kind of holds something in place while you braze it is fair game. Bricks are nice. Steel is nice because it's not going to matter when you heat it up. If you do use bricks, it's nice to kind of hang off the edge of the table. That seems to work out the best. One of my favorites, though, is just getting some 1/4-inch pieces of plywood, some scrap, and some spring clamps. And this spreads out the clamping ability, and it works out really well to clamp several pieces together while you braze them. So I'm actually going to demonstrate this, and I'm going to leave some of these little clamp setups both at Steam and at Riverside for you guys to use. But like I said, it's just simple, couple pieces of plywood and some spring clamps. So here I am turning on the flame, preheating my brass rod, dipping it in the flux, and then holding this up to the flame. From this angle, it looks kind of like the flame is touching the wood, but it's not. Make sure that your plywood is well away from that flame because it will definitely catch fire. So then I've preheated it. I start dabbing in the flux and melting the brass rod. My steel was getting too hot, so I pulled it away. And then I come back in to melt the brass rod. This connection's 3 pieces of wire, so you're going to need a little bit more brass than before. And then I let it cool down a little bit and kind of inspect the weld and make sure the brass rod has flowed everywhere in the connection. And then once it's cooled a little bit, I can unclamp it. And from there, the annealed wire can be bent and twisted, and you don't have to worry about that connection because brazed connections are super strong when you do them correctly. All right, so this is me demonstrating hanging a piece off the edge of the table using bricks to hold it together. Again, I'm preheating my brass rod, dipping it in the flux. And then I'm holding the MAP gas canister. In this case, it's not set on the table, kind of bringing it down below the edge of the table so the flame's right in the joint. You can hand hold this canister really in any position, but try to keep it as upright as possible so that you don't end up with any sort of flare-ups from the MAP gas. Yep. So just adding the brass, it flows like metal, and if, like I said, if you do the connection correctly, it's super strong. All right, so in this demo, I'm showing how to braze together like a circle where the tips touch each other and they don't cross over. This setup takes a couple of minutes to kind of get it so there's a little bit of tension between the 2 points, but the process of actually brazing it is exactly the same. Like I said before, it's really about the setup. It takes a few minutes to set it all up, but then the actual brazing process is a matter of seconds. So similar, preheating the brass rod, dipping it in the flux, then heating up the steel, and the brass flows into that joint. And then once it has a chance to cool, I'm going to, yeah, gloves. If it's super hot and you want to handle it right then, you can use gloves, but you can also have a little bowl of water nearby and quench, kind of cool that joint really quickly so you can touch it immediately. And then I'm going to attempt to break apart this joint, but I'm not going to be able to because, like I said, correctly brazed joints are super strong. Yeah, I put a lot of force into that. So the brass rod will eventually get down to smaller pieces which you can use, but the heat transfer to your fingertips will be quick. So all those tiny little pieces, don't throw those away. Brass rod is expensive. Put it in this can. I will weld these together so that we can continue to use the small pieces. Now the place to do your brazing, this is the table that you should more than likely do your brazing, but if somebody else is at this table, yeah, that's the tray, the drawer with all the supplies in there. If somebody else is here, you can also be on the welding table right to the left of this table. Actually, a couple of people can be on either end of this table brazing, and you're fine. Then there's also a little table back here with a vise that you could also be brazing back here as well. The vise is nice because you can set things together and clamp things together without the use of bricks or anything like that. So brazing table, welding table, that's a little side table, but do not braze at the TIG station. This is TIG welding. It's a really clean process, and we don't want the messy brazing contaminating this area. So do not braze there. All right, thank you very much for watching this demo, and good luck.